Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen sat at her station aboard the UES Vigilant, her eyes focused on the communications display. The massive starship hummed quietly around her as it patrolled the edge of human space. Most days, her job monitoring deep space signals was routine. Today was different. "Captain Reeves," she called, not taking her eyes off the screen. "I'm picking up something unusual." Captain Reeves walked over, his weathered face showing interest. "What have you got, Chen?" "It's an SOS signal, sir, but it's using an old Confederation emergency protocol, one they haven't used in at least 15 years. Reeves leaned closer. "Source?" "The Arcturus sector," Chen replied, pulling up a star map. "Specifically, from Lyresia." Reeves's expression darkened. The Lyrisi were among humanity's first alien friends when Earth joined the Galactic Confederation 50 years ago. While many species feared humans for evolving on what they called a death world, a planet with high gravity, extreme weather, and natural disasters, the Lyrisi had welcomed them. "Play it," Reeves ordered. Chen tapped her screen and a broken voice filled the bridge. The translation software struggled to keep up with the panicked alien language. "Under attack. Unknown species. Consuming everything. Please help. Billions already lost." The message cut out, replaced by static. The bridge fell silent. "Send this to Earth Command immediately," Reeves said. "Priority Alpha. And keep scanning for more transmissions." Admiral William Hayes stood before the Earth Defense Council in Geneva, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. The 12 council members representing Earth's united governments listened as he played the Lyrisi distress call. "The signal was received 18 hours ago," Hayes explained. "We've since lost all contact with the Lyrisi homeworld. The entire Arcturus sector has gone silent." Councillor Diaz frowned. "Admiral, while this is concerning, the Lyrisi are over, 20 light years from Earth. This conflict doesn't directly threaten us." Hayes had expected this response. He pulled up an image of the blue-skinned, four-armed Lyrisi. "When humanity first ventured into space, we were feared. Our strength, our aggression, our adaptability, all products of evolving on what the Confederation calls a death world, made other species nervous. But the Lyrisi stood by us. They vouched for us when others wanted to quarantine Earth." He paused, looking each council member in the eye. "I was there, 20 years ago, when Lyrisi ships helped evacuate our Mars colony during the Great Solar Storm. They saved 10,000 human lives that day." The room was quiet as the council members remembered. That storm had overwhelmed Mars's shields, and without the Lyrisi's help, the death toll would have been catastrophic. "We remember our friends," Hayes said firmly, "and we do not forgive those who harm them." Councillor Yamamoto nodded slowly. "What do you propose, Admiral?" Hayes tapped his tablet, bringing up the fleet deployments. "I recommend we send the Third Fleet to the Arcturus sector immediately. Not just a humanitarian mission, the full battle group." Murmurs filled the room. The Third Fleet was Earth's premier fighting force. 7 destroyer-class warships, 20 frigates, and the flagship, dreadnought UES Retribution. It would be the largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond the Sol system. "That's a significant commitment of our defense forces," Councillor Lee observed. "It is," Hayes agreed. "But if something is capable of overwhelming the entire Lyrisi civilization, a species much older and more advanced than our own, then we need to respond with overwhelming force." He didn't mention his other concern. If whatever attacked the Lyrisi wasn't stopped, it might eventually reach Earth. The council debated for another hour before Councillor Diaz called for a vote. It was unanimous. The Third Fleet would deploy to Arcturus. 3 days later, Lieutenant Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, transferred from the Vigilant to brief Admiral Hayes personally. Through the massive viewports, she could see Earth growing smaller as the fleet prepared for their faster-than-light jump. "Is this everything we received?" Hayes asked, reviewing the fragmented Lyrisi transmissions. "Almost, sir," Chen replied. "There was one final fragment that came through just before total communication blackout. Our translation team only decoded it this morning." She pulled it up on her tablet and handed it to Hayes. 3 simple words glowed on the screen. They consume everything. Hayes's face hardened. What kind of enemy consumes everything? Unknown, sir. The Confederation database mentions legends of a species called the phage, a bioengineered weapon from a war thousands of years ago. But most scientists consider it a myth. Hayes handed back the tablet. In my experience, Commander, most myths contain a grain of truth. He turned to his executive officer. Time to jump? Fleet is ready, sir. All ships report green status. Hayes nodded and addressed the bridge crew. What we're about to face is unknown, but our mission is clear. Find any Lyrisi survivors and extract them. Stop whatever force attacked them, and show the galaxy what happens when someone harms humanity's friends. He pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, prepare for hyperspace jump. Throughout the massive fleet, over 15,000 men and women, human Deathworlders trained for combat in the harshest environments, readied themselves for battle. The stars outside stretched into lines as the fleet entered hyperspace. 7 days of travel ahead before they would reach Arcturus. 7 days to prepare for a confrontation with an enemy powerful enough to destroy an entire civilization. In her quarters later that night, Chen found herself studying the Lyrisi cultural database. Unlike humans, the Lyrisi had evolved on a gentle world with minimal predators. Their entire history contained almost no concept of warfare. How could such a peaceful species have faced whatever horrors now awaited the human fleet? As she finally drifted to sleep, Chen wondered if humanity's reputation as dangerous Deathworlders, so often a source of discomfort in peaceful Confederation gatherings, might prove to be the very thing that would save their allies, or avenge them. 7 days in hyperspace gave Admiral Hayes plenty of time to prepare. In his private quarters aboard the UES Retribution, he studied everything known about the Lyrisi homeworld, searching for any clue about what they might face. On the large screen before him, images of Lyrisia showed a beautiful blue-green planet with gentle oceans and rolling plains. Unlike Earth, it had almost no mountains, minimal tectonic activity, and lower gravity. It was what the Confederation called a garden world, perfect for life, but offering few challenges to its inhabitants. Hayes frowned. The Lyrisi had evolved without significant predators or natural disasters. Their entire civilization had developed in peace. How could such a species defend themselves against a serious threat? A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called. Captain Enrique Santos of the UES Thunderchild stepped inside. Santos was one of the fleet's most aggressive tactical officers, with a reputation for unconventional thinking. You wanted to see me, Admiral? Hayes nodded. Captain, I need your assessment. We're heading into an unknown situation with limited intelligence. The enemy has apparently overwhelmed an entire planet of 12 billion Lyrisi. Santos studied the planetary images. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always. This isn't just about saving the Lyrisi, is it? This is about sending a message to the galaxy. Hayes raised an eyebrow. What message would that be, Captain? Attack. Our friends, and humanity responds with overwhelming force. Santos pointed to the fleet deployment map. No other species in the Confederation would send this level of military power to help an ally. They talk about peace and cooperation, but when real danger appears, they hide behind regulations. Hayes nodded slowly. Your assessment of our mission? We should assume there are no survivors, sir. Santos's voice was grim but practical. Prepare for the worst. If whatever attacked them could consume an entire civilization, we shouldn't expect to find anyone to rescue. Then why are we going? To hunt, Santos replied simply. Whatever this enemy is, it might eventually threaten Earth. Better to face it now on our terms with our full strength. Hayes studied the younger officer. This ruthless calculation was exactly why he had requested Santos for this mission. Begin running combat simulations with your crew, Hayes ordered. Prepare for all scenarios, including planetary bombardment. Santos nodded. Sir, what if this enemy can't be reasoned with? What if it's something that only understands force? Then we'll speak its language, Captain. Humanity knows how to fight. In another part of the massive flagship, Lieutenant Commander Chen worked with the ship's science team. Large screens displayed the pattern of communication failures spreading across the Arcturus sector. "It's not random," she explained to the gathered officers. "Look at the progression." The visualization showed blackout zones spreading in concentric circles from the Lyracy homeworld, engulfing neighboring systems one by one. "Whatever is attacking moves systematically," Chen continued. "It consumes resources in one area, then moves to the next, like a wildfire or a swarm of locusts," finished Dr. Eliana Vasquez, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. The small, intense woman had been studying the limited data for days. "I have a theory, but it's disturbing." She brought up ancient texts from the Confederation. Archives. There are references in the oldest records to something called the phage. Most consider it a myth, but the description matches what we're seeing. The screen showed translations of alien text, thousands of years old. "Consumes all organic matter, reproduces exponentially, cannot be reasoned with." The legend says the phage was created as a weapon in a forgotten war, Vasquez explained. A species designed to consume enemy worlds, but it got out of control and nearly destroyed the galaxy before it was contained. Chen felt a chill. If this is true, we're not dealing with an enemy that negotiates. We're dealing with a force of nature. Worse, Vasquez replied. We're dealing with a biological weapon designed to be unstoppable. That evening, Hayes called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. After hearing Dr. Vasquez's theory, his expression grew even more serious. "If we're facing the phage, we need to adjust our mission parameters," he stated. "This isn't just a rescue operation anymore." "Sir," Chen asked, "what if there are no Lyracy left to save?" Hayes's jaw tightened. "Then our mission becomes containment. We cannot allow this threat to spread further." He brought up a classified protocol on the main screen. Scenario Omega. The officers fell silent. Scenario Omega was Earth's last resort. Option: a plan for sterilizing an entire planet using orbital bombardment that would reduce its surface to molten rock. It had never been implemented. "I pray we don't need this," Hayes said quietly. "But if the phage has consumed most of Lyrasia and threatens to spread, we may have no choice." Santos nodded grimly. "Better one planet than an entire sector. Better a sector than the galaxy." Hayes looked around the room at his officers. "Our primary objective remains rescue, but prepare your crews for the possibility that this mission may become something else entirely: extermination." As the meeting ended, Chief Communications Officer Park rushed in. "Admiral, we've just received a message from Confederation space. It was hidden in a commercial broadcast frequency to avoid detection." "Play it," Hayes ordered. A hologram appeared showing a Tauri diplomat, his insectoid features tense. "Human fleet, turn back immediately. The Confederation High Council has voted. The Arcturus sector is under quarantine. Any attempt to breach the quarantine will be considered an act of aggression against the Confederation." The message ended abruptly. The room was silent for a moment before Hayes spoke. "They're going to leave the Lyracy to die." Standard Confederation. "Procedure," Santos said bitterly. "Quarantine and observe. They've probably calculated acceptable losses." Hayes stood up. "Send a message to all ships. Increase speed to maximum. We break through to Lyracy space in 12 hours. As the officers dispersed, Chen approached the Admiral. "Sir, if the Confederation has established a quarantine, they might have ships waiting for us." Hayes nodded. "I'm counting on it, Commander. But they should remember something about humans." "What's that, sir?" "We evolved on a death world. When our friends are threatened, we don't back down." His eyes hardened. "And we're very, very good at breaking through barriers." Throughout the fleet, commanders prepared their ships for both rescue and combat. The massive engines pushed the vessels faster through hyperspace, racing against time. Whether they would find survivors to save or an enemy to destroy, humanity's response would be the same: ruthless and overwhelming. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Lyracy system. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Admiral Hayes stood silent, taking in the sight before him. 3 Confederation peacekeeping vessels hovered in formation, blocking their path. Beyond them, the once beautiful blue-green Lyrizi homeworld was now mottled with vast black patches visible even from orbit. It looked like a planet being eaten alive. "Confederation ships identified, sir," reported the tactical officer. 2 Tauri cruisers and 1 Valaran command vessel. Hayes nodded. The Tauri were a rule-following insectoid species, while the Valarans were known for their cold logic. Neither would be easily swayed by emotional appeals. "Open a channel," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Tauri commander. His mandibles clicked nervously as he addressed Hayes. "UES Retribution, this is Commander Zix of the Confederation Peacekeeping Force. The Galactic Confederation has declared this system under quarantine. The phage contagion must be contained at all costs. Your presence is unauthorized. Withdraw. Immediately." Hayes stepped forward, his posture straight and commanding. "Commander Zix, this is Admiral William Hayes of Earth Fleet. We received a distress call from our allies, the Lyrizi. We are obligated to respond." "The Lyrizi are already lost," Zix stated without emotion. "The Accord has determined that the containment of the phage takes priority over rescue attempts. The mathematical calculation is clear. Sacrifice 1 species to save thousands." Hayes's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Are there any survivors?" "Unknown. Our sensors cannot penetrate the phage growth covering most of the planet, but it is irrelevant. No ship is permitted to approach the planet." At that moment, Lieutenant Commander Chen rushed to Hayes's side. "Admiral," she whispered urgently, "I'm picking up a signal. It's weak, but it's definitely Lyrizi." Hayes kept his eyes on the Tauri commander. "Where?" "A mountain range in the northern hemisphere. It appears to be a deep underground facility. The message says they've been holding out for weeks, but their barriers are failing." Hayes addressed the Confederation commander again. "We have confirmed survivors on the surface. We're going in to extract them." Zix's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "Unacceptable. The risk of spreading the phage is too great. The Confederation has calculated the acceptable loss." "Not acceptable to us," Hayes replied calmly. "Either assist us or stand aside." "We will use force if necessary, Admiral," Zix warned. "Your ships will be disabled if you attempt to pass." Hayes cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Target their propulsion systems with EMP pulses. Disable their engines but leave life support intact." "Sir," the tactical officer hesitated. "That would be an act of war against the Confederation." Hayes looked around at his bridge crew. "The Confederation abandoned our allies to die. I don't recognize their authority in this matter." He paused. "But we are not at war. We're simply removing an obstacle to a rescue mission." The tactical officer nodded and began inputting commands. Hayes opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. The Confederation has blocked our path and refused to allow us to rescue Lyrizi survivors. We will disable their vessels and proceed with our mission. Use minimum force necessary. These are not our enemies, just misguided bureaucrats." Throughout the human fleet, crews rushed to battle stations. "On my mark," Hayes ordered. 3, 2, 1, execute." The human fleet moved with shocking speed and precision. Before the Confederation vessels could raise shields, targeted EMP pulses struck their engine sections. The Confederation ships' lights flickered, and they began to drift helplessly. "Send this message to the disabled ships," Hayes ordered. "This is not an act of war. This is humanity answering a call for help. We'll discuss the consequences after we've saved the survivors." The UES Retribution led the formation past the disabled Confederation ships. Smaller frigates broke off toward the planet while the larger vessels maintained defensive positions. As they approached Lyrizi orbit, the black patches on the planet seemed to shift and move. Suddenly, objects launched from the surface. Dozens, then hundreds of them. "What are those?" Hayes demanded. The sensor officer's voice was tense. "Organic ships, sir. They appear to be growing directly from the phage mass on the planet." The tactical display lit up as the phage vessels swarmed toward the human fleet. Unlike the methodical Confederation forces, these creatures attacked with feral intensity. No formation, no tactics, just overwhelming numbers. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Hayes ordered. "Weapons free, defensive fire only." The space around the fleet erupted in weapons fire as human vessels engaged the phage swarm. The UES Thunderchild, under Captain Santos, pushed forward aggressively, its point defense systems blazing. "They're focusing on the Thunderchild," Chen observed, watching the tactical display. "It's almost like they're drawn to aggressive behavior." The Thunderchild took heavy damage in the first exchange, but Santos maintained his aggressive posture, drawing more of the swarm toward his ship and away from the vessels heading to the planet's surface. Santos is creating a diversion, Hayes realized. "Exploit it. Get those rescue ships to the surface now." Marine drop pods launched from the frigates, streaking through Lyrisi's atmosphere toward the coordinates of the survivor signal. Each pod carried a squad of Earth's finest soldiers. Humans evolved on a high-gravity world with natural disasters and predators, now bringing those survival instincts to save an alien species that had never needed to fight. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Captain Santos watched as his ship's shields weakened under the phage attack. "Their tactics are primitive," he noted to his executive officer. "They rely on overwhelming numbers, not coordination." "Sir, they're adapting," the tactical officer warned. "The second wave is moving more intelligently." Santos nodded grimly. "They learn quickly, but so do we." He opened a channel to Hayes. "Admiral, request permission to execute Maneuver Theta." On the Retribution, Hayes understood immediately. Maneuver Theta was a high-risk battle plan developed for asymmetric warfare, essentially, creating a deliberate weak point to draw the enemy in, then closing a trap around them. "Permission granted, Captain, but keep your escape route clear." Santos smiled. "Always do, sir." The Thunderchild suddenly reduced power to its rear shields, appearing vulnerable. Predictably, the phage swarm concentrated their attack there, only to be caught in crossfire as two frigates moved into position on either side. "Their behavior is fascinating," Chen said, watching the battle unfold. "They're not just a hive mind, they're learning, but they don't understand deception." Hayes watched the tactical display as the first wave of marine drop pods reached the planet's surface. "That's because they've never encountered humans before," he replied quietly. "They've never fought an enemy that evolved on a death world." The battle for Lyrisia had begun. In orbit, the human fleet fought with a combination of raw power and tactical brilliance against an enemy that outnumbered them hundreds to one. On the surface, Marine teams were landing at the coordinates of the distress signal, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them on a world being consumed alive. Humanity had answered the call. First contact had led to first blood, and the galaxy was about to learn why Deathworlders were so feared and so valuable as allies. Marine Commander Sarah Jackson led the first team to reach the Lyrisi sanctuary. Their drop pods had landed 2 kilometers away, forcing them to travel on foot through terrain that looked like something from a nightmare. The once beautiful forests of Lyrisia were now covered in a black pulsing substance that seemed alive. It grew over everything, consuming trees, buildings, and any life it touched. The air was thick with spores that would have been deadly without the Marines' sealed environment suits. "Stay alert," Jackson ordered her squad as they approached the mountain that contained the sanctuary. Movement at 2 o'clock. The Marines raised their weapons as shapes emerged from the black mass. Creatures that might once have been Lyrisi but were now partially consumed and controlled by the phage. Their blue skin was mottled with black growths and their movements were jerky and unnatural. "Hold fire," Jackson commanded. "They're victims, not the enemy." The creatures shambled toward them, not attacking but moving as if drawn to their presence. Jackson made a difficult decision. Non-lethal deterrence only. Push forward to the sanctuary. Entrance. The Marines activated sonic repulsors that sent the infected Lyrisi stumbling backward without harming them. The team pushed forward, reaching a massive door set into the mountainside. "This is Marine Commander Jackson of Earth Fleet," she transmitted. "We're here in response to your distress call." For a moment, there was silence. Then the door slid open just enough to allow the Marines to enter single file. Once inside, decontamination fields washed over them, destroying any phage spores on their suits. The door sealed behind them, and they found themselves in a large chamber carved from solid rock. Standing before them were Lyrisi, uninfected ones. Most were thin and exhausted-looking, but alive. An elderly Lyrisi with pale blue skin approached Jackson. "I am Scholar Theron. We did not expect anyone to come, especially not humans." Jackson removed her helmet after confirming the air was safe. "The Lyrisi helped Earth once. We don't forget our friends." Theron gestured around the sanctuary. "You risked much to reach us, but I fear you have come for nothing. We are all that remain of our civilization, 47 survivors from a population of billions." Jackson's heart sank, but she kept her expression professional. 47 is better than none, Scholar. We're here to evacuate you to safety." "The phage surrounds us," Theron said. "This sanctuary has held only because of the crystalline material in our walls. It repels them somehow, but our power is failing. In days, perhaps hours, they will break through." Jackson opened a channel to the fleet. "Admiral Hayes, we've found survivors. 47 Lyrisi in an underground sanctuary. Request immediate extraction plan." Up in orbit, the battle continued to rage. The Thunderchild had taken heavy damage but was still fighting, drawing much of the phage's attention. The UES Retribution maintained a defensive position, coordinating the fleet's efforts. "Acknowledged, Commander," Hayes responded. "Hold your position. We're sending additional dropships with science personnel. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Within an hour, Dr. Eliana Vasquez and her team arrived at the sanctuary. The xenobiologist immediately began studying both the phage samples collected by the Marines and the crystalline material in the walls. "This is remarkable," she told Hayes over the comlink. "The phage is even more advanced than the legends suggested. It doesn't just consume organic matter. It assimilates the knowledge and technology of the species it consumes." "That explains why their ships are becoming more coordinated," Hayes replied. "They're learning from each encounter." "Yes, but there's more," Vasquez continued. "Scholar Theron has shared some disturbing information. The Confederation detected the phage months ago but decided to use the Lyrisi as a test case to gather data on the enemy's capabilities." Hayes's voice was cold with anger. "They sacrificed an entire civilization for intelligence gathering." "They believed containment was the only option," Vasquez explained. "But I think I've found something they missed." She turned to the crystalline walls of the sanctuary. "This material contains trace elements found primarily on Earth and other death worlds. Elements the Lyrisi incorporated into their construction after studying human physiology." "Why would they do that?" Hayes asked. Scholar Theron answered. "After the Mars colony rescue, we became fascinated by human resilience. We studied what makes your species so adaptable. These elements were part of that research." Dr. Vasquez's voice grew excited. "Admiral, the phage avoids this material. It's toxic to them. They evolved or were engineered to consume life from gentle worlds. The extreme elements forged in Earth's harsh environment are poisonous to their biology." On the Retribution's bridge, Hayes immediately grasped the significance. "So Earth elements are their weakness." "Exactly," Vasquez confirmed. "Nickel, iron, selenium, common on death worlds but rare in the wider galaxy. If we could deliver enough of these elements directly to the main phage concentration." Hayes turned to his weapons officer. "Modify our conventional warheads. Load them with Earth minerals from our ship's construction materials if necessary." "Sir," Chen interrupted, studying her console, "I've been analyzing the phage communication patterns. There's something strange happening. They're experiencing fear." "Fear?" "They're a hive mind," Hayes said. "Yes, but they're afraid of us specifically," Chen explained. "They've consumed dozens of species, but humans are the first they've encountered that they can't predict. Our aggression patterns, our willingness to sacrifice for others, our deception tactics, they can't understand any of it." Hayes considered this information. "Then we'll use that fear." All ships, push forward. Full aggression protocols. Show them what Deathworlders are capable of when protecting their own. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, the situation grew more desperate. The sanctuary's power was failing faster than expected, and the crystalline barriers were weakening. Commander Jackson organized the Marines into a defensive perimeter around the Lyrisi survivors. "How long until extraction?" she asked Hayes. "Working on it," he replied. "The phage swarm is too thick for normal extraction. We need to create a clear corridor." Captain Santos's voice broke in, strained but determined. "Admiral, I have a proposal. The Thunderchild is already heavily damaged. Let us make a run directly at the main phage hive ship." "That's a suicide mission, Captain," Hayes said gravely. "Not necessarily," Santos replied. "If we load the Thunderchild with Earth minerals and detonate them inside the hive ship, it might disrupt their entire network. The crew can evacuate in pods before detonation." There was a long pause before Hayes responded. "Prepare your plan, Captain, but we'll only implement it if there's no other option." As the human fleet pushed deeper into the phage swarm, using their newfound knowledge to target weak points, Dr. Vasquez worked frantically with the Lyrisi scientists to synthesize more of the Earth element compound. On the bridge of the Retribution, Hayes watched the battle unfold with growing concern. The fleet was holding its own, but the phage was adapting quickly. And according to Chen's latest analysis, more phage ships were on their way from elsewhere in the sector. Time was running out for the 47 survivors, and possibly for the entire human fleet. Captain Enrique Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderchild, studying the damage reports. His once proud destroyer was barely holding together. Hull breaches on 3 decks, engines operating at 40% capacity, weapon systems failing. But it would be enough for what he had planned. "All non-essential personnel have evacuated to other vessels," his executive officer reported. "Only the volunteer skeleton crew remains." Santos nodded. 28 crew members had chosen to stay, enough to pilot the damaged ship on its final mission. Everyone knew the risks. Everyone had volunteered anyway. "Begin loading the Earth minerals," Santos ordered. "Every kilogram we can spare." Throughout the ship, crews worked to fill cargo bays with nickel, iron, selenium, and other elements from Earth. They stripped panels, removed spare parts, even broke down non-essential equipment. Anything containing the materials toxic to the phage. On the UES Retribution, Admiral Hayes coordinated the battle. The human fleet fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Worse, Chen's sensors had detected a massive new wave of phage ships approaching from deeper in the sector. "They'll be here in less than 2 hours, Chen reported. "At least 3 times our current opposition." Hayes's expression remained calm, but his eyes showed the weight of his decisions. "Status of the ground evacuation?" "Commander Jackson reports the sanctuary's barriers are failing," Chen replied. "They need at least an hour to reach the extraction point with all survivors." "And Captain Santos?" "The Thunderchild will be ready in 20 minutes, Hayes nodded. "Then we proceed with the plan." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. Form a corridor to allow the Thunderchild clear passage to the phage hive ship. This is our primary strike. Give Captain Santos everything you've got." Across the fleet, commanders acknowledged the order. Ships began to maneuver, creating a path for the Thunderchild's final run. On the planet's surface, the situation grew desperate. The phage had discovered the sanctuary and began to break through even the crystalline barriers. Commander Jackson and her Marines formed a last defensive line around the Lyrisi survivors. "The nearest landing zone is 3 kilometers away," Jackson told Scholar Theron. "We need to move now while we still can." Theron looked at his people, the last of the Lyrisi. Most were scientists, teachers, and children. None were warriors. "We are ready, Commander. Lead us." Dr. Vasquez worked frantically with Lyrisi scientists to synthesize more of the Earth element compound. They converted it into grenades that temporarily repelled the advancing phage. "How long do we need to hold?" Jackson asked Hayes over the comms. "Long enough for the Thunderchild to deliver its payload," Hayes responded grimly. "Then we implement emergency extraction." The unspoken understanding passed between them. If extraction became impossible, Hayes would be forced to implement Scenario Omega, sterilizing the planet with the survivors still on it, rather than risk the phage spreading further. As the Marine team began to move the Lyrizi survivors toward the extraction point, the sanctuary's final barriers collapsed. The phage poured in, consuming everything in its path. "Fall back by squads," Jackson ordered. "Covering fire." The Marines deployed in a fighting retreat, using their Earth element grenades to create temporary safe zones as they moved the Lyrizi through the infected landscape. Every step was a battle. Every meter gained came at a cost. Up in orbit, the Thunderchild began its final run. The battered destroyer pushed forward as other human ships created a path, drawing phage vessels away or destroying those that blocked the route. "We're approaching optimal detonation range," Santos reported as his ship pushed deeper into enemy territory. Phage organisms began to breach the hull, drawn to the concentration of life. On the Retribution, Chen monitored the phage communication patterns. "Admiral," she said urgently, "they're calling reinforcements from elsewhere in the sector. Hundreds. More ships are on their way." Hayes made the hardest decision of his career. "Captain Santos, new orders: do not detonate on the hive ship." "Sir?" Santos sounded confused. "Push through to the planet's core drilling facility. The Lyrizi built shafts that reach nearly to the planetary mantle for geothermal energy." Santos understood immediately. "You want us to deliver the payload to the planet's core?" "Correct. If the Earth elements are toxic to them, let's make the entire planet poisonous. It's the only way to ensure they can't recover." There was a brief pause before Santos responded. "Understood, Admiral. Adjusting course now." His voice was steady. Accepting the mission and its implications, Hayes opened a channel to Commander Jackson. "Change of plans, Commander. Get those survivors to Extraction Point Beta immediately. You have 15 minutes before the entire planet becomes uninhabitable." Jackson didn't waste time asking questions. "Understood. Moving now." The Marines increased their pace, practically carrying the weaker Lyrizi. Several Marines fell behind, sacrificing themselves to hold off the pursuing phage. The Thunderchild broke atmosphere, its hull glowing red from the heat of entry. Santos piloted the failing ship toward the massive geothermal facility that the Lyrizi had built to power their civilization, a shaft that reached deep into the planet's crust. "We've got phage boarders," Santos's executive officer reported. "They're breaking through to the bridge." "Seal the doors," Santos ordered calmly. "Buy us just a few more minutes." The few remaining crew members barricaded themselves on the bridge as Santos guided the ship down the enormous shaft. Warnings blared as the heat and pressure increased, pushing the damaged vessel beyond its limits. "Approaching optimal depth," Santos reported to Hayes. "The ship won't hold much longer." "Captain," Hayes began, then stopped, unable to find adequate words. "It's been an honor, Admiral," Santos said simply. "Make sure everyone knows. The Lyrizi will not be forgotten, and neither will the Thunderchild." The connection cut out as the ship plunged deeper into the planet's crust. On the surface, Commander Jackson's team reached the extraction point just as 3 dropships from the fleet managed to land amid the chaos. Marines loaded the Lyrizi survivors while holding off waves of increasingly frenzied phage. "They're attacking differently," Jackson observed as the creatures swarmed with reckless abandon. "No self-preservation at all." "They know they're dying," Dr. Vasquez replied, helping a Lyrizi child into the dropship. "Their hive mind senses what's coming." Below the surface, Captain Santos set the final detonation sequence as the bridge temperature rose to unbearable levels. Phage organisms broke through the barricaded doors, swarming toward the remaining humans. "For Earth," Santos whispered, pressing the detonation control. The Thunderchild exploded at the boundary between crust and mantle, releasing its payload of Earth minerals into the planet's semi-liquid core. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The elements spread through the molten rock and began rising toward the surface through the planet's natural systems. On the surface, the dropships launched with seconds to spare. Jackson watched from the viewport as the black phage covering the planet's surface began to writhe and recoil. Geothermal vents erupted worldwide, spewing Earth elements into the atmosphere. The last marine dropship cleared the atmosphere just as the phage ships in orbit fell into disarray, their hive-mind connection disrupted by the death of the main colony. Admiral Hayes watched the tactical display as the 47 Lyrisi survivors, all that remained of a civilization of billions, were safely brought aboard the human vessels. "All ships prepare for immediate hyperspace jump," he ordered. "Our mission here is complete." Maya Chen approached Hayes on the bridge. "Admiral, the Confederation forces have restored power. They're demanding we surrender for violating the EO quarantine." Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the Lyrisi life signs, the last of their kind, saved by humanity's refusal to abandon them. "Tell them," he said quietly, "that we'll discuss it after we've brought these survivors home." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a transformed Lyrisi homeworld. What had once been a garden paradise, then a nightmare of phage infestation, was now something different entirely. A planet cleansed by Earth elements, uninhabitable to the phage but potentially recoverable in time. In the medical bay of the UES Retribution, Dr. Eliana Vasquez examined the 47 Lyrisi survivors. Most were physically exhausted but otherwise healthy. Their mental state, however, was another matter entirely. "They've lost everything," she reported to Admiral Hayes. "Their entire civilization, their history, their future. They're the last of their kind." Hayes nodded solemnly. "Make sure they receive whatever care they need. They're under Earth's protection now." Throughout the fleet, the mood was mixed. They had saved the survivors. A victory. But the cost had been high. The Thunderchild and her volunteer crew were gone. Several other ships had sustained heavy damage, and dozens of Marines had sacrificed themselves to hold off the phage during the evacuation. Lieutenant Commander Chen found Hayes in his quarters studying star charts. "The Confederation has sent 6 more peacekeeping vessels to intercept us," she reported. "They're demanding we surrender the Lyrisi survivors and face charges for violating the quarantine." Hayes looked up from the charts. "And what do you think we should do, Commander?" Chen considered carefully before answering. "The Confederation abandoned the Lyrisi to die. They have no moral authority in this matter." "I agree," Hayes said. "Set course for Earth. We'll deal with the Confederation diplomatically after these people are safe." "Sir?" Chen hesitated. "I've been studying the data we collected about the phage. There's something you should know." She brought up a holographic display showing the pattern of phage expansion across the sector. The phage didn't randomly arrive in Lyrisi space. They were deliberately introduced there. Hayes' expression darkened. "By whom?" "I don't know yet. But the initial outbreak patterns suggest a controlled release, not a natural spread." She paused. "Someone used the phage as a weapon, Admiral, and they chose the Lyrisi as the first target." "Keep investigating," Hayes ordered. "Quietly. If someone is weaponizing the phage, we need to know who and why." 3 days into the hyperspace journey, back to Earth, Scholar Theron approached Maya Chen in the ship's observation deck. The elderly Lyrisi stood beside her, looking out at the streaming lights of hyperspace. "Your people did what no other species would do," Theron said quietly. "You defied the Confederation. You sacrificed your own to save strangers. Why?" Chen considered the question. "On Earth we have a saying. The true measure of a civilization is how it treats its most vulnerable members. The Lyrisi were vulnerable. You needed help. That's all that mattered to us." "The Confederation called you violent," Theron observed. "They feared your aggressive nature, your evolution on a death world." "They weren't entirely wrong," Chen admitted. "Humans can be violent. We evolved in a harsh environment that forced us to be strong, to fight, to survive against overwhelming odds. But we also evolved to protect our communities, to stand together against threats." Theron's forearms moved in a gesture of understanding. "Perhaps this is why the Confederation fears you. They have forgotten that sometimes protection requires force." "What will your people do now?" Chen asked. "We will rebuild," Theron said simply. We are few, but we carry the knowledge of our civilization. With Earth's help, perhaps we can start again. You'll have it, Chen promised. Every resource we can spare. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace near the edge of the Sol system, immediately detecting the Confederation diplomatic vessels waiting for them. The sleek alien ships formed a blockade, though not a particularly threatening one. On the bridge of the Retribution, Hayes opened a channel. A hologram appeared showing a Bortani diplomat, a species known for their legal expertise. Admiral Hayes, the diplomat began formally. The Galactic Confederation Security Council has ruled that your actions in the Arcturus sector constituted a direct violation of quarantine protocols. You are ordered to surrender your vessels and the Lyrisi refugees for proper processing. Hayes stood tall, his uniform still bearing the dirt and blood from the battle. The Confederation abandoned the Lyrisi to die. They were your members, your responsibility, and you calculated their lives as an acceptable loss. The greater good, the diplomat began, but Hayes cut him off. Was served by our actions, he stated firmly. The phage has been neutralized on the Lyrisi homeworld. The spread has been contained, and 47 citizens of a Confederation member species have been rescued. Those are Confederation citizens under Confederation protection, the diplomat insisted. No, Hayes replied. They are under Earth's protection now. They requested asylum, and we have granted it. The diplomat's expression shifted to one of concern. This is a dangerous precedent, Admiral. The Security Council cannot allow member species to act unilaterally in crisis situations. Then the Council should act decisively when crises arise, Hayes countered. Not hide behind quarantines and acceptable losses. He gestured to Chen, who transmitted a data package to the Confederation vessels. We've sent you our complete findings on the phage, including the effectiveness of Earth elements in neutralizing them. We've also included evidence suggesting the outbreak was engineered, not natural. The diplomat appeared shocked. That is a serious accusation. It is, and one the Confederation should investigate thoroughly. Hayes's voice grew firm. Now, we are returning to Earth with refugees who need care and resettlement. The Lyrisi are under our protection. Any attempt to forcibly remove them will be considered an act of war against humanity. There was a long pause before the diplomat responded. The Council will need to discuss this development. They can discuss it while we pass, Hayes replied. Our ships are coming home. Without waiting for a response, Hayes ordered the fleet to proceed. The Confederation vessels made no move to stop them as they passed. 2 weeks later, Maya Chen stood with Scholar Theron on a hillside in New Zealand. Before them stretched a valley of lush green fields and flowing rivers, a small portion of Earth now designated as the new Lyrisi homeland. It's beautiful, Theron said, his aged eyes taking in the landscape. Different from our homeworld, but beautiful in its own way. The gravity's a bit stronger than you're used to, Chen noted, but your people will adapt over time. Yes, Theron agreed. We will adapt. We must. He turned to her. Your Admiral Hayes spoke to the human world government yesterday. He told them our story. Chen nodded. Earth has unanimously voted to protect the Lyrisi as an endangered species. You'll have everything you need to rebuild. At what cost to your people? Theron asked. The Confederation is not pleased with humanity's defiance. Chen smiled slightly. Earth has never been particularly concerned with pleasing the Confederation. We joined on our terms and will remain on our terms. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, Theron performed a traditional Lyrisi gesture of gratitude, all 4 arms extended in a complex pattern. When we spoke of Deathworlders in the past, we meant it as a classification, not understanding its true meaning, he said. Now we know. A Deathworlder is one who faces death unflinching, who stands against the darkness when others retreat, who remembers their friends and keeps their promises no matter the cost. Chen looked out over the valley where the last of the Lyrisi would begin their new lives. That's what humans do, she said simply. We protect our own, and now, you're one of us. Throughout the galaxy, News of humanity's defiance of the Confederation to save their allies spread quickly. Other species began to re-evaluate their understanding of the Deathworlders, not just as physically formidable beings, but as a species that combined physical resilience with uncompromising loyalty and moral courage. In the council chambers of TU, the Confederation, debates raged about humanity's place in galactic society. Some called for sanctions, others for a new understanding, but all agreed on one thing. The humans had shown themselves to be not just dangerous, but dangerous with purpose. And in the darker corners of the galaxy, predatory species took note. Attacking humanity's friends carried consequences too terrible to contemplate. For in answering an alien SOS with a ruthless fleet response, humanity had sent a message that echoed across the stars. We remember our friends, we keep our promises, and we do not forgive those who harm our own. The end.